Hello and welcome to Love from the Other Side. If you're on this video, perhaps you too are in need of hope. We bring you stories from around the world of people who have shared their near-death experiences. Today's experience comes to us from Deanna. She had been having stomach pains for about a week before she finally went to the emergency room. I'm going to pick up her story at that point, but after she shares her near-death experience, be sure to stay tuned because she has a continued experience while she is in the hospital on this side of the veil that is really quite interesting. Before we get started, I would love to ask you to be our newest subscriber to this channel. And if you haven't done so yet, hit that bell icon and it will let you know when we upload new videos. Let's go ahead and get started with Deanna's experience. As I was on the gurney, about 6 or 7 nurses, doctors, and medical technicians were all around me. They started to undress me and attach IVs to my body. Then I was gone. In less than a blink of an eye, I was in the emergency room. I then found myself in a room made of stone walls. The closest I can describe this hall is a medieval castle. There was a long wooden table in the middle of the room. On the table were 3 white plates, one on either side of the table and one at the end of the table. The settings were completed by eating utensils and goblets. There was no food on the table. The table was lit with sconces burning from on the walls. I came face to face with our Lord Jesus Christ sitting at the head of the table and facing me. He didn't say a word. As I looked at him, I realized I could perfectly see every hair on his beard and head. He was wearing a plain white robe. Jesus had dark hair, a beard, and kind eyes. Once I realized I could see perfectly, I took a big breath and I realized I could breathe wonderfully too. I felt no pain either. I looked over Jesus's left shoulder to a door. The door looked like a wooden swinging door at a restaurant. Coming through the door was my father, my sweet dad who had died many years before at the age of 57 from a massive heart attack in his sleep. He looked so amazing. He was beautiful, glowing, happy, and restored to good health. When my eyes locked onto his, I felt the most amazing feeling of love. I have never felt that kind of love on earth before from anyone. I felt love wash over me and over every single cell in my body all at once. The light had the most amazing pure love with light and warmth to it. As he came through the door, I glimpsed a glowing bright light behind the door. This was secondary to seeing my father. I was about to scream, "Dad!" and run to embrace him. Jesus put his palm up to me and said kindly, but very firmly, "Not now, go back." Jesus never spoke with his mouth, but it was loud and clear in my head. I instantly went back to my body. I found myself about to be put into a CAT scan machine and completely unable to breathe. I was trying to pull at the tech and I was holding my chest. He said, "Just one more minute, honey, we're almost done." Then I passed out. When I woke up over a day later, I was in the cardiac ICU and I couldn't remember why I was there. I had some sort of mask on my face for oxygen and IV needles in my ankles, hands, and the crook of my arm. My family was all around me and they told me that I had heart failure. My heart, kidneys, and lungs had started to fail. They told me that the cardiologist on call said if I had gotten there 10 minutes later, I wouldn't have made it. I was in shock. I thought I had a blockage in my stomach. In my wildest dreams, I never would have thought that I had heart failure. I was only 58, in very good health, and had never even had a surgery. There is so much more to share about this experience since I came face to face with my dad and Jesus. I feel that what happened after was truly amazing, and I would like to share that. As my 4 children, ages 26 to 39, and my husband gathered around my hospital bed, They told me that the two doctors had argued about whether to intubate me or use the oxygen machine with a mask over my face. The doctor that didn't want to intubate me in the emergency room won the argument. While my family was gathered around my bed, crying and scared, I felt the most unusual peace that enveloped me for almost 8 months after the experience. This was something I had never felt before in my life. I felt calmness all through my mind and body. I had been a smoker and I had no desire to smoke. It was like I had never been a smoker. The kids went on and on about how afraid they were for me, and I kept telling them I was fine and I would be fine. I didn't tell them Jesus had sent me back because I was still in shock over the whole experience. The strangest thing was, as they were gathered around my bed over the 3 days that I was in ICU, there was another guest in the room. A man had come in dressed up in jeans, biker boots, and a t-shirt. He was around my age, close to 60. He brought a stepladder through the door and moved it to the wall. Then he stood up on it and began writing sentences across the wall with a pencil. He would write a bit, stop, think about what he wrote, and then he would continue writing. This went on for 3 days. I couldn't see what he was writing, but I felt what he was writing. He was preparing to die and was writing down every decision he had ever made in his life. He was analyzing them to determine if he had made the right decision, since he didn't think he was worthy of going to heaven. On the 3rd day, he nodded his head. He was satisfied with all of the decisions he had made. He smiled, took the ladder, walked through a door. As he walked through, I noticed that the room that mine connected to wasn't used as a hospital room with a bed. It had tables and a chair in it. I couldn't understand why the doctors, nurses, my family, or the cleaning people didn't pay any attention to this man. I saw his face clearly as well as his clothes. He was just another person in my room. Everyone kept asking me why I was staring at the wall and I couldn't answer them. 4 days later, before I left the room, I asked the nurse why they didn't use the room attached to mine as a hospital room. She looked at me oddly and said that they used it as a break room. My son asked me how I could have known that. I told him about the man in the room who was writing on the wall. I told him that when the man opened the door to that room, I was able to see in. My son got very upset with me, and he told me that I couldn't talk about it anymore. He thought that I had ICU psychosis. He told me to keep my mouth shut or they would put me on the psych ward. I took his advice and was later sent home. When I went home, I looked at the online obituaries. I saw the man that was in my room, and he was in the obituaries with his paper. It said he was a biker, and he had died in our other area hospital from a motorcycle accident. He died on the 3rd day I was in the ICU. I was absolutely stunned. I have felt a strong connection to the other side since my N.D.E, and it's like I have one foot in heaven and one here on earth. I don't get rattled by much anymore, and I don't tolerate people that waste my time with foolishness. I don't know why I was sent back by Jesus. I certainly haven't contributed much since my hospital stay. After my heart attack and for a few months after, I had very bad memory issues. I would go to start a sentence with somebody and I couldn't find the words to say. I was so upset by this, and I asked the cardiologist what was wrong. He said that I had lost oxygen and blood to my brain when I was unable to breathe. He said that's what caused my memory loss and I should start to regain my memory soon. It took about 3 months, but I finally got my memory back. That said, the only memory I retained crystal clear was my trip to see Jesus and my dad, and the man in the hospital. After 4 years, I've come to realize that, as someone of Italian descent, everything revolves around table and food. We break bread, we talk, we laugh, and we cry around the table. As for Jesus putting his palm up to me, like giving me the hand, he knew that was something I would understand. I had used the hand to let my kids know I had had enough. As for telling me, "Not now, go back," he knew I'd argue to stay, especially when I saw my father. Jesus was firm enough in this that I didn't argue, and I went straight back to my body like a child. Since this experience, I have had extremely vivid dreams that consisted of very detailed conversations with my deceased father, grandmother, and yet-to-be-born grandson. These are much different than a normal dream. I've received important information, and I have not forgotten these conversations as I would if it were a regular dream. I've spent the past 4.5 years since this experience pondering over it from every angle. I was happy that I had the experience and anxious that I wasn't accepted into heaven. I still find myself worrying if this means that I won't be able to join my Father and Jesus in heaven when I come to my final day on earth. If you would like to read more of Deanna's experience, I will put a link in the description section of this video. There's also a brief question and answer session where she goes into greater details on some of these points. As always, thank you so much for spending your time with us. Until next time, God bless.